it actually forced prices up. So we've had extraordinary price acceleration, and that's just made the math almost impossible for families trying to save a down payment and then to be able to afford the current housing prices. Here in Atlanta, my hometown, is a great example. Housing prices on the more affordable side of town have tripled in the last 3 years, and we are seeing what had historically been a very affordable city increasingly be out of reach for far too many families. And I think that is, it's ultimately a supply problem, that we are not building enough housing to meet the demands in our metros.
So let's talk about that supply problem, because as I think you've pointed out in various things that you've written or talked about, that the lack of supply doesn't mean if someone's given a voucher but there's no place to rent, then you're competing and driving the price of the rental up, as opposed to if government policy encourages the creation of new housing. Could you talk about the challenges of that, both at the federal and at the local level? What are the drivers of a government policy that we need to have a greater housing supply?
Well, I think I'll start with federal, and obviously it's a very timely issue right now as Congress is debating the Build Back Better Act and figuring out what's in it. Obviously, we believe housing should be a priority within that. We actually argue that housing is infrastructure, if you think about it. But there's no country in the world that has solved housing without a significant federal investment in it. And so the challenge on the supply side is if we don't find incentives to build more and build in the right places, the danger is we'll keep exacerbating. Today, because of the supply constraints and cheap money and private actors buying up houses, all of those have created these accelerated price moves. So if the danger, and we think we should have enough vouchers for everybody who needs a housing voucher, but we've got to make sure there are enough units out there to be able to go rent. So the first is, can we make sure that people have the financial ability to rent or buy? The second is, it's important where the housing is. And we have learned over and over again, whether this is Cambodia or Malawi or Atlanta, that the most successful communities are mixed income. And the best model for equity in our country and world are for children to grow up in mixed income communities, but we haven't designed them that way. And you have to acknowledge the role of race in this, that the federal government mandated racial restrictions, and local cities all around the country, all over the country, zoned in a way to keep out both low income and particularly low income people of color. And we've got to figure out how to change those zoning rules, because in some ways the pressure on gentrification would go down if it was easier to move into communities of opportunity. But if you get displaced and can't move anywhere, then it's absolutely natural to resist, in some cases, really needed investments in local communities. So we think the best model is actually mixed income everywhere in a city, across the whole city. That means the federal government has a role to play in finance, but the local government has a huge role to play in zoning, and we've got to really tackle both sides of it.
So let's talk about that political dynamic, because we had a tale of 2 years last year. The first half of the year was given over to social justice and thinking about what the Floyd and other cases meant, and the business community supporting more social justice initiatives. The second half of the year looked like the revenge of the empire, where other people felt loose to say racially indiscreet things, to have groups that are racially indiscreet tearing down the banners of black churches in Washington before they marched on the Capitol. So how do we get zoning changes when people equate protecting their real estate investment with not allowing low-income housing in their area? How does that work?
I think, sadly, this is a huge challenge, and the only way it works is everyone participating. In a way, it's why Habitat cares so much about volunteers. We, pre-COVID, engaged about 1.5 million volunteers in our work directly, and that's not because it's the most efficient way to build homes. How many of you in the room have ever built with Habitat? So, quite a few hands going up for those in virtual land. It is, we may have some really skilled construction people in the room, but if you're like me, for me, the reason I loved building before I ever joined Habitat was you experienced community in a way that is so rare now, where people are all coming together, and it doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter what your income is, and you're doing it in relationship. And if we don't do that, I think we have to make it personal for people. Because right now, whether it's a blue state or city or a red state or city, uniformly people will resist allowing housing that's affordable for low and moderate income families to be built in their community. And California, a very blue state, it's not just NIMBY, not in my backyard, it's banana, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And it's become almost impossible to build, and therefore the prices are ridiculously high. And the math just doesn't work at all for families. And ultimately, that's not sustainable. So if you care about the environment, you don't want to have 80% of your city not living in your city because all the roads are then choked in traffic. If you want health, you want to make sure that people actually have safe housing to live in. And certainly if we want racial equity, it is so critical that we actually create paths of opportunity. And it's very hard to have those paths of opportunity without dealing with housing. It's certainly not the only need, but in many ways it's a prerequisite for all the other pieces that we want for a decent society. So in some ways, I have seen real transformation happen globally and locally when somebody who may not have ever been even to the other side of their own city builds a meaningful relationship with someone who has all the same hopes, same dreams, same aspirations, just hasn't had the same opportunities. And I think then suddenly it's not those people, it creates a face of the people who want the same chances we all want.
So Jonathan, I just heard you say something. I'm trying to ape John Bryant, by the way, just to let you know. You were saying in effect that the volunteers help create the political force to obtain the zoning changes that you need in order to do it, so that it is not just the joy of their involvement and their feeling of involvement, but there's a political effect of that.
That's very much our strategy. So what our hope, in some ways, it was the scariest thing we did. We shifted from a strategy of how many houses can we build, which was a really good goal, to what would it take to meaningfully reduce the housing deficit in all the geographies we serve, which was a scarier thing, because it really forced a mindset shift, which was we want to engage volunteers so that not they won't be celebrate and be done after their volunteer experience, but we want that volunteer experience to be an on-ramp so that they will help us create the policy enabling environment locally, statewide, federally, so that then we can actually change policies so that the market will work better for low and moderate income families. And then how do we, much as the theme of this conference has been, open up lending so that banks will actually lend to families? How do we help those families get qualified and ready, and then create an environment where Habitat and other builders can build more housing that's affordable? Because today, even if you're a good-hearted builder, whether nonprofit or for-profit, the math doesn't work to build something that's actually affordable for a family making even 2 minimum wages to be able to purchase or rent. So we have got to figure out how to solve the math problem together, and either that's got to be land or it's got to be in financing.
Well, in 2050, 70% of the world's population are going to live in cities. That's going to be the first time in human history we've had that degree of concentration. And in the rest of the world, there won't be power, there won't be water, and there won't be sewage for those people. So Jonathan, as you look at your international billet of activity, the challenges for you and your organization are extraordinary. But thank you for being here today and sharing this with us. Unlike John, I'm going to keep on time and give back to the next speaker. But let's hear a real round of applause for Habitat and for Jonathan Reckford.
Great to be with you all.
All right. And I will have to say, I'm a monthly donor to Habitat for Humanity because I believe that everyone should have the possibility of home ownership. And so let's all think about, you can choose an organization that you want to support, but they're definitely a good one. And so thank you both to the gentlemen. And please make your way across the hall and be sure to check out some of the amazing Idea Lab breakouts we have created for you. And we'll see you back here at 3. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat. Our program will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat. Our program will begin shortly. Please welcome back our MC, Maggie Linton.
All right, I know there was not enough time for sessions, but it's okay because we've got a great session coming up right now. And welcome back, and we have an incredible lineup this afternoon, so let's get right into the program. Please welcome to the stage the Chief Administrative Officer of Bank of America, Mr. Steve Boland, the President, Preferred and Consumer Banking, Bank of America, Mr. Aron Levine, and the founder and CEO of Operation Hope, John Hope Bryant, with a great conversation.
Let's hear it, Jim. Either way, that's fine. All right. Hello, everybody. Oh, come on now. The Bible says be hot or be cold. If you're lukewarm, I'll spat you out. Translation, even God is not like mediocrity. Good afternoon. That's more like it. We are honored to have all of you here for this continuing conversation of meeting the moment. This moment, I believe, is historic. I don't think that we're going to appreciate this moment for 20 years. I think it's going to take us 20 years to look back at this and understand and appreciate it for what it was, and everything we do in this moment matters. And I'm particularly honored to have two difference makers show up here today. When I hear the titles rattled off, they don't seem to underscore the magnitude of any of these conversations. It's hard to put this stuff into words. This afternoon, you're going to, I think after this session, 2 sessions after this, you're going to, or maybe it's next session, you're going to hear from, as an example, Tony Ressler. You just saw Tony Ressler walking in the hallway. There's no security details, nothing with him. You just wave, or he maybe or maybe not wave at him. But he's the 600th richest man in the world. His wife is the richest woman in Hollywood. He's up from nothing. He owns the Atlanta Hawks. Now you know his players, which he pays with his petty cash. But you wouldn't know him. You might walk right past Aron, and you might think Aron is a linebacker or something. I don't know for Falcons, but Aron is actually the president of the consumer bank. You can tell I don't really like this thing in my ear. Of the consumer bank for Bank of America, and he has, I'll make sure I say this properly, 42,000 bank branches.
4,200.
4,200. Sorry, I'm beginning to 1,000.
I would like that 42,000.
I know,
That would be,
but hold on, 70,000 employees.
yes.
4,200 bank branches, 70,000 employees. But hold on,
Here it comes.
$1.2 trillion in assets that he's responsible for. Just as one man. And the brother next to him, who I'm definitely going to get to know, not because he's the most powerful black man at Bank of America, the highest ranking, and the chief administrative officer will explain what that means in a moment, but because he's a Jamaican, right? A Jamaican immigrant who respects his mother. I'll get to that in a second. My mother's right there. But let's talk about the part that you relate to. You might say chief administrative officer. Like, oh, what's that? Okay. The bank is $3 trillion in assets. The bank has 210,000 employees. That's it, 210,000 employees.
Correct.
Rolling up from Steve, we're not talking about like the Black Affinity Group or something, or the public affairs group of urban America. No, all public policy rose up under Steve. The entire foundation. How big is the foundation?
We give several $100 million.
No, wait, no, hold on, slow, wait. See, what happens is, when you're a rap star and you got one hit, you got 15 bodyguards, you got, like I said, sunglasses on at night, you're strolling through the club like you own it, one hit. My man's in charge of this entire foundation, the entire public policy, entire communications network. For a $3 trillion bank, he's got not a shred of jewelry, no watch. He's wearing $75 loafers. I saw that tie at JCPenney's last week.
Oh, man.
My man is chilled, completely chilled. He don't care what you say about him, what you think about him. He ain't arguing with you. He not flossing because he don't have to. He's rich and powerful. He moves quietly because when you've got the power, you don't need to use it. But when you talk to him about what's important to him, what he really cares about, he lights up like a Christmas tree. It's like, why? Why are you here? Why don't you just phone it in? I mean, Aron has to be here. He's on my board. But Steve, why are you? It's his mother. And his mother and grandmother in Jamaica raised him. And mom worked that graveyard shift like my mother did. And he took for granted that when he got up in the morning and breakfast was there on the table for him, steaming hot, that's just the way the world worked. What he realized later is that mom came in from that graveyard shift, made sure that breakfast was made for the children before she went to sleep, every day. His mother, unfortunately, has gone on to heaven, has been promoted, before he ever had a chance to show her what he could do. So he lives that legacy every day. He lives that legacy every day. That's why these conversations are important. You need to unpack and unveil and reveal not the what, but the how. Is this real? When you talk about what was important, you translated that experience in Jamaica and that modest home you had to the state of black home ownership. Why?
John, when you think about it, and one of the things we didn't get a chance to talk about in the beginning, my mother did own a home, so I grew up in a home and I knew what that was like. And I have spent the better part of my life trying to create home ownership opportunities, from doing individual loans as a loan officer to running programs now where we can do billions and billions of dollars in loans so that we can create home ownership in black and brown communities. I mean, look, when we talk about this home ownership thing, because people, they hear and they, okay, you got a good program, and while, yes, we understand home ownership creates stability, we are affecting generations. If you want to create generational wealth, if you want to create economic empowerment, home ownership is foundational.
Yep.
So we have an obligation to do that.
Yep.
It's in our best self-interest, and it's in the interest of our communities.
Yep. So getting this done is aspirational because the current home ownership rate for black folks is 41%. Just to give you some context, if you're in white America, I think it's 70+%. Mm-hmm. So you got a delta, a gap that's gaping. And we're gonna have to see how you do on that. But I think you can look at what they may do based on what they've already done. So let me now talk to you about what you've already done. And Aron, I just found out something else which was pretty impressive about you backstage, but I wanted you to talk about that financial advisor program. I want to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
The thing that impressed me out of everything else during the pandemic, during the social justice reckoning of Black America, again, you guys didn't scream, you didn't holler, you didn't beat your chest. Very quietly raised the employee rate for every employee at the bank to $20 an hour.
Yeah. Yep.
Everybody. Wait a minute. And then said $1 an hour a year until 2025?
Yeah, till we get to $25 an hour, minimum wage.
So that means every employee at Bank of America, this is the janitor, the counter,
Yeah,
the
teller.
teller.
The teller, yep.
Everybody will be a minimum of
$25.
$25. Now everybody's running for the
Right,
exit, trying to go
applications.
get that. Right.
Send them our way.
Where's my nephew Mason? $25 an hour is a living wage any day of the
Yeah.
week.
$20.
So some would say, well, this must hurt your economic performance. This somehow impacts negatively your shareholder value. I love math because it doesn't have an opinion. It's just the math. I love these conversations because the numbers speak volumes. So the wrap, you can't do well and you can't do good at the same time.
Right.
You can't do all this stuff for employees and in the community and the foundation and expect to make a profit. You just had a earnings report recently. Let's talk about it. I'm sorry, you talk about it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we were also the first to go to $17 an hour several years back. So this is now a legacy of moving
And
the
this is
minimum
Brian,
wage.
your CEO.
Brian, our CEO. So we got to 17. We quickly moved to 20, as you said, and we're very proud that we've now announced $25 over the next 5 years. We also then just put up probably the best quarter we've had, I don't know, in the history of the company practically. So you can, yep. And remember, this is on top of a whole host of things that we did for employees during COVID, of course, right? So extra daycare, extra support.
Whoa, back up. Repeat that again. Extra what?
Daycare. We
Daycare.
made sure what we gave, you probably know the number better than me, a million hours?
Yeah.
1 million hours of daycare, so our employees.
1 million hours of daycare? How does that work?
So employees who needed, they were home, but they might have, their ability to work meant they also had to take care of their children, so they could apply for additional daycare support or home support. We also increased a pay for the people who are working in the financial centers. One of the challenges, as you can imagine, for us, a big part of our company could work from home, but we had 4,000 financial centers that we wanted to keep open to clients every day. And remember, 30% of those centers are in low to moderate income area codes. So we have the highest percentage of any of the big banks that are in the low to moderate income areas. So we had to keep those centers open and keep our associates safe, keep our clients safe. We also gave everyone additional pay who had to work those times. So in addition to the minimum wage going up, we added additional compensation to everyone's paycheck, a couple $100 per paycheck. So a lot of things that we did. And then when you sort of play all that out, obviously our expenses went up during the time period, but what has, of course, occurred is the level of talent that we were able to acquire and bring in, new talent, very diverse talent. And so we're really proud. We had a program called Pathways, I think I talked to you about last year. We had committed to bring in 10,000 employees from low to moderate income zip codes over 5 years. We accomplished it in 3, so we already have achieved the 10,000. We just said we'll do another 10,000 over the next 5 years. So that'll be 20,000 employees from low to moderate income areas. So, but in the end of the day, what it does for us from a business standpoint, in the consumer bank, we have to serve 66 million American customers. You can imagine that represents every community in this country, and our ability to serve that community base means we need to have the representation of the people who are delivering financial advice, delivering lending advice, delivering small business advice, reflect the community that we serve. So everything we do has ultimately had a very big business benefit because we're serving clients better, and therefore they're giving us more of their business, and then you have an incredible third quarter even with the higher expenses.
Yeah, and so John, you touched on something, maybe not, I don't know if it was intentional. So Aron just told you everything that we've done in terms of financial performance, and then he also talked about all the things that we did for our teammates. Because we've done those things and you perform at a high level, it also enables us to do more for our communities. And Brian talks about this often. He talks about the genius of the and. We have to deliver for our team.
Genius of the what?
Of the and.
Okay.
So you have to deliver for our teammates. We got to deliver for our shareholders.
And?
We have to deliver for our clients. And we have to help empower and advance our communities.
Yep.
So let's use the pandemic. Through the pandemic, we delivered to minority and low and moderate income communities over 30 million masks. I'm going to hopefully get these numbers right. Almost 300,000 bottles of sanitizer, 8 million gloves. You know, things that we needed in our communities that weren't immediately accessible. So we were focused on our employees, we were focused on our customers. We also said we got to focus on our communities because we all just went through the greatest health crisis of a generation.
As we were agreed, and as we were talking, so my man Aron here is super competitive, like on everything. And so we're in the back, and I guess I'm giving Steve too much attention. I mean, first of all, hold on. Stand up. Hold on. Just come here. This is making smart sexy. This is what every black man in America should want to be. Just smooth.
I'm going to go home and tell my wife that I made smart sex.
Just smooth. And he's leaving here and getting back on the private jet to go back to headquarters. So I'm talking to Aron. I'm sorry, I was talking to Steve about how great he's doing at this diversity, inclusion, whatever. And by the way, I met Steve through Aron. So I'm talking to him, and Aaron's like, yeah, but he's not as good on diversity inclusion as I am. My numbers are better.
Hey,
facts are facts. Aaron, I'm not talking to you. Yeah,
Facts
but
are
my
facts.
numbers are better. He said, Steve, aren't my numbers better? So tell us what you did.
Yeah, well, facts are facts, right? So facts are facts. You know, one of the things that Steve talked about this, one of the charges I had back in 2012 was to how do you build a financial advice model that's accessible to a broader set of clients, right? So people have more access to wealth management and investing. And then one of the biggest challenges of the wealth industry was diversity, as you know, right? How do you create the financial advisors of the future that are more diverse? So we built a program and a model that was a base salary and bonus as opposed to the traditional commission-based model. We created a way to bring in associates into the bank with an unregistered job, right? A job, effectively an entry-level job where you could learn the bank itself, checking accounts, saving accounts, credit cards, mortgages, traditional, and then created a training program and a development program that allowed anyone who was interested to move up, get registered, and sort of become a financial advisor, and not only work within the consumer bank, but many have gone on to work within our Merrill Lynch and our private bank with high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals. But you know, we were hiring on basically an annual basis, 60 to 70% of what we hired was diverse, and probably 50, 60% female. Mm-hmm. So when you start doing the math, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, all of a sudden, and then as those associates built their skill set and started moving up into new jobs, management level jobs, you know, our diversity, you know, numbers that we track very carefully at every level increased. And so you not only had this amazing pipeline of talent coming in to serve our communities, but a group, an industry that historically had not been able to really create diversity. Financial advisors and wealth. We now had this amazing source of not only that we can benefit from, but again, I said our Merrill Lynch and private bank partners, and so that's carried through. So it's been a great story.
So Aron, one of the reasons I think that's so important is if you want to, now we're the largest economy in the world, the U.S. economy, 20 trillion plus. We're only 350 million people out of a world of 8 billion plus. So this is really magic in a bottle, what we have here in America. The fact that you and I could come from humble beginnings and sit here on this stage talking about the movement, control of, or influence of the levers of power to help those who don't look like us, and to sit on equitable footing with our friend Aron is the magic of America. That said, there's, of course, enormous challenges that we still face and are in front of us and behind us. The 2020 was nothing less than traumatic for all of us. In this environment, you're a role model and not just a leader. Both of you. You seem to have taken this on as a badge of honor, as a responsibility, not as a burden. In this economy, you've got minority neighborhoods where I grew up fixated on the success they can touch. The football player, I understand it. The basketball player, I get it. But there's only a few hundred of those jobs. The rap star, I get it. Chris Tucker was here last night. There's only one Chris Tucker. You can't scale that. But there's a farm club for professional sports. It starts in middle school, goes to high school. Then they pluck them out in college to the pros. There's no farm club for banking, for business, for engineering, for the things that drive that $20 trillion in GDP. There's no farm club. So not only as I'm hearing, you guys are being role models yourselves, what you're doing is putting institutional, I'm making this a statement, but I'm asking a question. This is what I think I'm seeing, but I need to understand whether this is what you're doing. You're putting institutional, a laddering system, using the bank's infrastructure, if I understand your example, to actually create a farm club, a fielding system, a pipeline, am I getting this right? Of talent, because now once people know you and can vouch for you and there's relationship capital, then they can take you into the narrower, higher income levels of, am I on point?
100%, yeah.
No,
Is that happening?
You're getting it right. And there's another step to it too, because that's what we get to influence, but Bank of America is only 200 some odd thousand colleagues. So how do you continue to have this be sustainable? In response to some of the horrific things we saw in 2020, we came out and announced a $1.25 billion commitment. And that we wanted to address
1.25 billion is part of the
1.25, and it's above everything else that we do, right?
Good.
And it's about racial equity, systemic inequalities, addressing healthcare and education.
Okay.
And so the reason I thought about it as you were just talking is because a component part of that, to give you an example, is what we've done with HBCUs, and that's 25 million that we've given out of that commitment that have gone to over 20 HBCUs. Fantastic. So again, it's not just who's here, but you got to build the pipeline. Well, if you're going to build the pipeline, you've got to invest, and you've got to invest in these students.
And by the way, we're out of time, but
let me say one more thing.
Important conversation, so we're going to wrap it.
So we looked at it two ways. We said, what's the minimum wage that you need to do to attract the best talent and make sure everyone has a working wage? But that is not enough by itself. Does everyone that we hire have a career path? And you have to do both things at the same time. So we can pay someone $25 an hour, but if 5 years later they're still making $25 an hour, you haven't succeeded. And so that's the key for us.
What do you want this audience to know about you and your commitment and Brian's commitment? Where do you want the audience to know you're going with this, and how do we hold you accountable?
Yeah. So let me start.
Oh, wait a minute. So Aaron just pointed to you when I said about accountability. He pointed to you. You've been pointing to yourself backstage.
So, look, first I think it's important because a lot of times we talk about a commitment we make. I just mentioned the $1.25 billion commitment. We didn't get to the community homeownership commitment and $15 billion that we're driving over affordable housing over 5 years. And I can keep throwing out hundreds of millions here and hundreds of millions there. I think the important part to know is it's who we are. Yeah. So we aren't making these commitments in response to any event solely.
Right.
You heard where we started on the wage, right? We were on our way to $20 an hour before any of this. Yeah. We really do believe in this and. We believe that we can deliver for our employees. We believe we can deliver for our clients. we believe and have demonstrated we can deliver for our shareholders. And yes, we are making a difference by also making our communities better. And, you know, like you said, we're out of time. We didn't get to talk about climate and environment. I hosted a conversation
We'll have you back.
with Byron Allen a few weeks ago, and we talked a lot about the importance of that. I mean, that's important in our communities as well. So there's just so much to unpack.
No, we'll have you back. Or you can send the jet for me and I'll come out to Charlotte. What, you want a final comment?
Look, Steve said it so well. It is that power of the end. Our company's DNA is about making an impact on people's financial lives as well as our communities that we serve. So how do we make the most positive impact on individuals, on companies that we serve, and on the communities that we serve? And we do that in a whole host of ways, helping people achieve their financial lives, but also the way we give back and the way we're committed. And that's really what our company's all about. And I think that to put into that sort of statement of the power of the and, you can serve shareholders and the community. You can make it a great place to work, you know, and drive productivity and have a very successful business. That's what we're all about.
And they're accessible. If you want to reach them, reach out to their offices. You'll find somebody who will respond to you. And they're doing Hope Inside. Ladies and gentlemen, Aron and Steve.
So many of our people can use the financial literacy, education, know-how, training to improve their own security and the awareness of the tools that you're providing.
There is at least 1/3 of our Delta people who have experienced some type of financial challenge, and as a result, it has created some type of a mental stress. So we also can appreciate and connect the connection between financial wellness and overall wellness for all of ourselves and our families.
We deal with everyone from senior management on down to ramp agents, and the one common denominator is going to be a budget. And being on a budget is kind of like a roadmap. It's going to let you know, it's going to be a guide as to where your finances are and where there's some opportunities.
Consider this like Oprah on money when you're talking to our coaches. It's really a no blame, no fault environment. It's just unpacking your life and repacking it with success as part of the plan.
We appreciate all you do. Financial health affects your mental and emotional well-being, it affects your physical well-being, and it's all part of us doing more to our total well-being at Delta to help us be the best we can be every day.
How many of you flew here? How many of you took Delta? All right. Well, we're extremely lucky to have one of Atlanta's and America's leading CEOs joining us again this year, Delta Airlines CEO Ed Bastian. The man stuck up to the plate when it came to COVID. And John Hope Bryant.
I don't mind being biased. This is one of the coolest CEOs on the planet. And unluckily for him, he's also my friend, which means I bug him all the time. But how did I start wearing tennis shoes with suits?
I think you've outdone me here, John.
I don't know.
I got to step my game up here.
No, you're looking good.
Last night I was in New York, and Danny Meyer, he's the founder of Union Square Hospitality. I was at his restaurant, and he came by. And he started wearing sneakers also. He's following us.
It's very comfortable
and
professional.
I'm going to give a plug. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but he had these pair of shoes that one shoe was called Optimism, and the other shoe is called Joy. And I might have those words wrong, but it's essentially that. And it's K-Swiss, I'll tell you the brand. You can go out there and find those. And I hope everyone, one foot, and you were just reminding about optimism and joy, and that's what we bring the world.
Hope and opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So Ed Bastian is, in addition to being the Matt Damon of the airline industry, because he's so handsome, really is what you think he is. I mean, what you see is what you get. But let me go deeper. You can really source out how and who somebody is by what happens when nobody's looking and what happens in tough times. Ed and I, a couple touch points. We went on Squawk Box to announce $2 billion worth of profit sharing. So he made sure that once he hit the mark for his shareholders, that any dollar above that got shared with line employees. Just ran into one of his flight attendants in the hallway in the back.
She's out here somewhere.
That's right, we wanted a photo. And one of your flight attendants gave me a Black Lives Matter Delta Airlines button just yesterday, which I have in my pocket, which you supported. And so he wanted to share this prosperity with all, which is why when you get on a Delta Airlines flight, the flight attendants don't have an attitude. I don't know if you noticed, they're pleasant. The ground crew is pleasant. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, the folks at the ticket counter, how you doing? Yes, right over here. Because they're shareholders. They're a participant in the upward mobility of the company. But right after we did that, the pandemic hit and the brakes hit. And let me back up and say a year before that, there was a crisis. There was somebody out here bragging about you last night. Forget which CEO. It was Fortune Magazine's editor was bragging about you last night, by the way, that when I won't name names, but when a certain organization, which you thought was inappropriate for our values, they got into a bit of an issue, and you took issue with the issue and said you would not, sponsors anymore. So you guys will figure out the rest of this. The state legislature here, some became punitive, and most CEOs would back down. Ed never flinched. So this is 2019. You know what I'm talking about? That's right. It's 2019. So now we're at 2020, and he's given $1 billion away in 2019 to his employees, $2 billion plus in 2020. The pandemic hits the next month. All of a sudden, the company's in a tailspin. Nobody's flying. People are now wondering, is this business plan viable? He never had to lay off one employee. They took a voluntary, what's it called?
Just took voluntary time off.
It's not a furlough, is it?
No, but it was all optional. People would, month after month after month, just agree to stay home, which was, by the way, because of the pandemic, the lower level of flying, we needed less employees for no pay. And we said we cover your benefits, of course. And then everyone had their own choice. And we had 50% of our company do that for the bulk of last year without paying a dime for them. But because of the investment that we made in the bank over time about how important this company is, and they did that to save the jobs of younger people.
And to save the company. So when COVID began to ease up and people began to fly again, they had their strongest return to earnings of any airline in the country because everybody was waiting to support them and their employees were waiting to come back. So the employees felt that they were with you in the good times, but they also backed you in the tough times. And in the midst of all this, we had been talking to your people about Hope Inside the Workplace. And once again, Ed was ahead of his time. 2018, he greenlit us putting a pilot into the HR department. Not everybody was a believer. They didn't want nothing negative. They just didn't think that this was relevant for their people. Now, I'm not going to give the numbers, Ed, because I don't know if this is public information, but maybe you can. But I get a call from somebody very senior in Delta, not Ed, saying we have a problem. A good number of our employees, and they're the biggest employer in Georgia, by the way, a good number of our employees have now taken an emergency 401k loan in 2020. I mean, this is a big number. And so it wasn't a protest, wasn't some lines around the corner. They just did it on the internet at midnight and took a loan. And they're not going to end up paying that loan back in all likelihood.
It's over $1 billion of loans.
So, okay, he told the number. Listen now, it's 80,000 employees at Delta. 80,000. Not every employee took the loan, but some portion of that 80,000 was in such a struggle. $1 billion in emergency loans in 1 year. 1 year, one company. Imagine what that number is nationwide for all companies. The number's unbelievable. Nobody talks about it. Ed's talking about it. They said, look, we have to do something about this. So they then went from 0 to 12 Hope Inside locations across the country to help their employees do financial coaching with us in every place around the country at no cost to any employee.
Thank you.
These are the things that happen behind the scenes that you don't hear about. I'll tell you one last, and I'm going to shut up. I get a call from Ed, and again, I'm not going to betray his confidences here. But I get a call from Ed at 9 o'clock one night. I know exactly where I was. I was in Peachtree City, and you said, John, I'm struggling with something, and it was the right to vote issue. Sorry, it was the voting issue here in Georgia. Make a long story short, he said to me, John, I got this wrong. I first thought I'm trying to make sure that a bad thing doesn't happen, meaning trying to pull the egregious parts of the legislation, the negative parts out of the legislation, trying to keep the bad things from happening. But after the conversation with me and others, he said, now I am putting myself in the shoes of my employees and my shareholders in my community and those who are black, who fought and gave their lives to vote in the 1960s. And putting myself in their shoes, I can't just not do the bad thing. Hold on now. I gotta do the good thing. So I have to say, this is wrong. He comes out the next day, all heck breaks loose. I can't say what I really want to say. Oh, all hell breaks loose. 100 CEOs come right behind him. Boom, boom. We're with you, Ed. We're with you, Ed. We're with you, Ed. Now you have an entire nation of CEOs. But it took one. It took one who had the backbone to say, this is my business, because it's our business. Because the right to vote, I think I'm quoting you here, is sacred.
Absolutely. And like other things, it's not for sale.
Woo! Now let's be clear. We're not against it. There's nothing against anything here. Who's against the right to vote? We're just saying it should be protected. It's just saying on my watch we're going to support everybody, black and white, red and blue, anybody. We're going to support everybody. But you, I guess my whole point here is over. I want to get your reflections on this social justice moment we've been experiencing and how it's affected you personally. Because you could just turn away. You've done very well. You could get some kind of a town car, drive you to work, and ignore it. But you don't.
Yeah.
What does all this mean to you as a leader? How has it touched you or affected you as a leader? And the way you lead? And what do you think this is as a signal for the business plan for America?
Yeah. Well, first of all, John, thank you for that. That's probably the best, longest introduction I've ever had. So and by the way, we could just keep going for another 10 minutes and we'll wrap this sucker up. That'd be great. But I love you too, brother.
Love you.
We're in a time of change, and it's really clear. And I know people have said that before, and I know promises have been made that haven't been kept. I know corporations have pledged to go do the right things time and time and time again, and unfortunately, they turned into more check-the-box type things to show that they're there, but there was no personal accountability, no personal ownership of the topic.
Yep.
We need to own this. And this is not something we delegate to our HR department to own people or HR matters. It has to start at the very top of the company. And when I talk about my own personal view on these topics, whether it's on equity and inclusion, the diversity of our workforce, the opportunities to give people a better chance for the future, I'm talking to my 80,000 employees. I'm talking to my hometown here in Atlanta, where I'm the largest employer in town. I'm talking to our state. And I know everyone doesn't agree with me, and that's okay. But we have to have a point of view, and we have to have a personal sense of accountability and responsibility in making it happen. And specifically to my employees, I think of Delta as a family. Those are 80,000 family members, some of whom I know have been impacted in various ways particularly over this last couple of years, in very negative ways. So whether it's their financial wellness, their emotional well-being, their physical health, their social health, I've got to be there for them. And the pandemic, if it did one thing to us all, it quieted this world. It made us all stop and watch. And none of us could take our eyes off what happened to George Floyd that day. And none of us could in good conscience say, how can that possibly happen in today's America? And what do I personally need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? And that goes deep into this level. And it starts with, though, having that personal accountability and responsibility to make change happen.
Where do we go from here with all of this? Corporations, I think, since the CEO of Coca-Cola's age, Robert Woodruff, have shown you can do well and do good, but that for a long time, that sort of disappeared. Folks were just focused on profit. Now it appears it's coming back, and I feel it's being baked in that you've got to have something above the line and below the line as far as your purpose in order to make a profit and have shareholder value. So what's your opinion about that? I do also think that there is a view by some of my white brothers and sisters that somehow by blacks and minorities finally getting some recognition that somehow this is a zero-sum game for them. That's an incorrect narrative. There are 4 things that have never gone backwards in American society: real estate values, stock values, they go up, correct, come back higher, correct, go back higher, GDP, gross domestic product, and the prospects of a college-educated 55-year-old white man. In the history of this country, have never gone backwards. There's enough room for everybody. It's just that you can't grow this economy with just anymore 55-year-old college-educated white men. It's just not enough to go around.
That's right.
You need everybody.
You need everybody.
So we're talking about expanding the table and adding a chair, and there's nobody should feel threatened. I mean, you're not threatened by somebody else coming up. It seems like the opposite is true.
It's completely the opposite. You know, you say that it's the good thing to do, it's the right thing to do. It's also the smart thing to do. Our differences make us stronger. That's what our country was founded on, is our differences. And the fact that we welcomed for decades and decades and decades people from around the world to help build this country. We've all come from someplace, right? And we need to continue to be a welcoming, diverse, strengthened by our differences, because I think we have and the American dream, while a lot of people question, that's our responsibility to keep it alive.
As you travel the world, you're in how many countries?
Oh,
did you guys want to give some applause? Did I just cut you off? I'm sorry.
We travel. Well, we're not there yet because of the pandemic. When we're full up next year, we'll be back to over 60 countries around the world.
60 countries you travel to.
Yeah.
So when you travel around the world yourself, are you seeing that the position, that the way in which you've led, and the way in which the company has led at Delta has enhanced your reputation and around the world, and has also enhanced maybe the way you've been able to do business?
Oh, it clearly has. I mean, the level of political divisiveness that we see in our country today, it's hard to look at, but it's also not there. Other parts of the world. Other parts of the world breaking away. You had Brexit, right? Breaking away. We don't talk about it anymore, but it happened. You had
Great Britain, Brexit.
Yeah. You have so many different local issues going on a global stage that sometimes the U.S. stuff, we kind of get mired in what's going on here. This is a human condition.
Right.
That people want to have voice. People want to have opportunity. And the pandemic, not just in our country, but around the world, created a much greater divide between the haves and the have-nots. You look at what's happened in the stock market as a perfect illustration. I saw a stat today that now 10% of the wealthiest Americans have 90% of the value of the stock market.
Wow.
10% have controlled 90%.
Wow.
I've never seen that level of divide in the past.
Yeah.
And if that's not a wake-up call, that this isn't going to be a happy ending where this thing is going. So I think it is a call to action.
Tell us a little bit about, as we pivot here, tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Delta that they may not be aware of, that you're proud of, and you're or either frustrated with, proud of, or planning. And then I want you to end with a vision for the future that you think is achievable for most leaders. Let's just limit this to the private sector. What do you think are the tools in their toolbox that will make them better as leaders going forward? But let's start with Delta.
So at Delta, the pandemic showed us the power of our people. Our people got us through this. Right? It was hard. It was difficult. While many people were staying at their homes and being served by others, we had to go out and fly. We had to go deliver people. We had to get people to the front lines of the medical crisis. We needed to keep the supply chains open. We needed to get families to emergency, to bedside as people were suffering in really dire straits. And even if only 5 people were on a plane, we were carrying those flights, and we didn't stop.
Wow,
through the
5
entire,
people on a plane.
Yeah, many times. I mean, they got to tell me it was the best time to fly. You all missed it. I was out there flying.
Should have told Shacher. Should have been right there.
Exactly. But we are in a position where we know at Delta our people are our strength, and we've always said that it's our number one asset. People think our big assets are the planes we fly. It's the people that fly them. It's the people that serve our customers. It's the people that fix them, and the people that take the reservation calls. And those are our heroes. Those are our best assets. But the pandemic exposed elements of wellness and resilience that we had never seen before. We had never, as a society, at least in the last 100 years, had our physical health threatened by an invisible virus. And that threatened our well-being, threatened our business, but more importantly, threatened our so we leaned into heavily to covering our people, creating testing. We were maybe the first company out there testing all of its employees. June of 2020, we had testing. It was extraordinarily expensive. We owned it. We tested all of our people. And by the way, we found thousands and thousands of people who were asymptomatic with the virus, and we stopped the virus every single time, because that virus would have been passed on to someone else and replicated and doubled. And the doctors at Mayo said we saved an enormous amount of life by doing the testing early and getting out in front of it. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of in terms of what we've done. We put everyone's been affected by the emotional impact and what we've been through. And so we don't call it mental wellness anymore. It's your emotional health. And there's not a single person in this room that hasn't been touched by what has happened, what we've been through over the last. And some people have been touched worse than others. Yeah. And so we've put counselors into the workplace, not just financial, but health counselors. And we've hired trained psychiatrists and psychologists and medical teams. And Henry Ting, who's my new chief health officer from the Mayo Clinic, awesome guy, and leading that whole charge. It's all about taking care of our people and meeting. Chief Health Officer.
Chief Health Officer.
Yeah, he was one of the top guys from Mayo's, now reports directly to me as our Chief Health Officer. The financial well-being. In the past, most companies, and by the way, most companies still to this day, I pay you a fair wage. It's your job to figure out what to do with it. It's not my job. And if you screw up, you can't hold me responsible. Well, that's not okay, because we know financial wellness sits at the foundation of a lot of other issues and creates other issues. So bringing hope into the workplace. And by the way, thank you for what you've done in terms of providing us those counselors. In the last number of months, I think we had Financial Wellness Month a couple months ago. We've had over 1,500 people sign up in the space of 60 days, and we've done 1,000 appointments. And it's from credit counseling to how to get my loans in order, to how do I start to prepare a budget. And it just keeps going and going. And by the way, it's not just for the younger employees or the people lower on some of the wage scales. It's our pilots. It's other people that are also engaging. Because just because you have more money doesn't mean you don't have problems. Many times you have bigger problems. Yeah. Money. It doesn't discriminate. It goes after everyone in terms of some of its issues. And then the social issues, knowing that whether it's the diversity and equity and inclusion challenges, sustainability, which is a big challenge, the governance issues we have with our political system. So it's a complicated world. And in the past, we used to leave that to, we just kind of take a piece of that. Yeah. Well, I can't figure out all that stuff, but I'm just going to keep my head down and try to make money and just kind of keep moving through before. The world is interconnected now. And if your best asset are your people, the most important thing you can do to invest in their wellness, and they will do amazing things for you as you move forward. And that's our strategy, pure and simple.
Get a return on investment.
Yeah, you get amazing return, and by the way, you grow generations. This is a generational investment that you're making, because they bring new people in. Our hiring brand, listen, every company in America is having a hard time finding talent, not at Delta. We're having thousands and tens of thousands of people apply to try to come in, and it's great. We've already hired 8,000 people this year.
Wow.
And it's something that
10%.
because they realize that the quality, the hiring brand, is about the care that people take for each other, and that's a company they want to be part of.
Yeah, as we wrap up, I could talk to Ed all day. As we wrap up, I want to tell this quick story. I was doing a town hall at Delta Airlines. I want to commend Tim Mapes and Joanne Smith and other leaders there who are so key to this shared success of yours. I was doing this town hall, and I was talking about the cost of smoking. And I was saying if you make $36,000 a year and you go to Starbucks 3 times a week and you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day, that's $6,000 a year. That's 20% of your income. There's 2 ways to make money: make more, spend less. You're taxing yourself 20% and you're killing yourself. And you need to go get you some Folgers or a Keurig at the house and stop smoking. So Leilani Campbell, who's one of our PR people, was outside, and she called me, she said, John, a maintenance guy at Delta who is doing the lawns or something, maintenance guy, he was overhearing the conversation inside. And he said, that John Hope Bryant was saying, and Ed, about smoking, he says, I think I'm gonna stop smoking. She says, well, did you finally get aha about your health? He says, no, I've been smoking for a long time. I knew it was bad for me. But he told me it cost me $6,000 a year. It's killing my wallet. I'm gonna stop smoking. So we're saving lives, indirectly.
Changing lives. It's awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in saying thank you to one of the greatest CEOs in America.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Love you.
My name is Jonetta Robinson. My business is Tree of Life Solutions Consulting Firm. My coach, Lawana Ross, even though I went through the entrepreneur training program, I also did credit counseling in between. So me and Lawana Ross, my coach for Operation Hope, we had begun to bond. I was sharing inner things with her, and she was just open enough to give me just random advice. It wasn't like she was telling me what to do. And when she suggested the Entrepreneurs Training Program, that's how I jumped in. When I'm working with someone else, as far as a coach or a consultant, in order for me to be a coach or a consultant, I have to learn how to follow. So Lawana allowed that atmosphere. My coach was not bossy. What I received from Lawana was always give. And only thing she wanted from me was to follow through on the other end. If she told me to submit a budget, if she told me to share this or look up this on the website or download, whatever she told me to do, once I followed that step, she followed through on her end. So that's what really made the bonding significant. The one thing I would not have been able to accomplish without Operation Hope, as far as an entrepreneur, is being able to be consistent, being able to steer the course. I went from one workshop to the next workshop, which allowed me to go further and then open up more. Because of my upbringing, I didn't trust well. So I wasn't just going to share all of my businesses and all of my information with a random business just because they said they got hope. I mean, I had to tiptoe my way around and see, are they sincere? You know, are they going to call back? If I show up, will they show up? You know, if I miss a meeting, will they shrug me? In fact, I missed a meeting. Oh my God. I did not get shrugged. She was there. She was still there for me the following month when I missed. To get the certificate at the end, it allowed me to see that, okay, if I could do this for myself, then I can help someone else do the same thing. I can empower someone else to do the same thing.
All right, when this next group is finished, you are going to want to learn more about the incredible initiative they have to discuss. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Chairman of Aris Management and Principal Owner of the Atlanta Hawks, Tony Ressler. Alt Finance CEO Marcus Shaw, Morehouse College President Dr. David Thomas, and from Bloomberg News, Ms. Jordyn Holman.
Hello, everyone. So we are going to be talking about alt finance. You heard who's on this awesome panel today. And so I think just as, table setter, we all could probably agree that finance needs to do more in terms of recruiting Black diversity. We've seen progress in the past few years, but we need more consistent, rapid growth. So that's what this panel's about. Marcus, I'm going to start with you.
Fantastic.
You're at Alt Finance.
Indeed.
So tell me why, with your organization that's focusing on getting more Black talent, but specifically HBCU students into alternative finance, why do you want to focus in that sector of finance compared to investment banks, say?
So, Jordyn, thanks for the question. The world of finance has been dealing with diversity and really the inclusion aspect of talent for quite some time. Investment banks have thought about how do they do this and working with great organizations like MLT and SEO for a number of years. But what we've seen is that the alternative investment space is generally smaller, but has a lot of influence. I mean, you're talking companies that may have a few thousand employees, but certainly have relationships with companies, hundreds and thousands of companies that have millions of employees. And so finding a pathway for young Black talent, not only to find their way into the industry, but also to grow their level of inclusiveness in the industry is something that we found was really important. And so we wanted to focus on this part of the industry in finance.
And then, so Dr. Thomas, you run Morehouse, which is obviously a very storied institution and full of Black talent. So why do you think that HBCU students might often get overlooked when it comes to being recruited into alternative finance?
Well, I think there's two sides to it. One is, alternative finance, asset management. It's really a relatively small workforce in that industry. And it's an industry where up until now, people get recruited off of networks of people who are already there. And it's an industry where you don't have many, for example, graduates of Morehouse, unlike some other industries where you have a lot. So where people recruit off of networks, who the people in your organization already know is who they're going to bring in. I think there's another side of it, which is, at least when I think about Morehouse and our focus for the last 150 years on being an institution that produces individuals who go out into the world and not only do well for themselves, but well for their community and the Black community. We've created lots of doctors, lots of public servants, lots of lawyers, right? Because those, for many years, were the fields that we saw and preachers, not to mention. Those were the fields that we saw directly impacting what happened to Black people on a day-to-day basis. And now for us, what this effort represents in terms of having our students understand the broader world of finance, alternative finance in particular, is about the last leg of the civil rights movement, which is economic prosperity, intergenerational wealth, and value creation. And so there's kind of two sides to the coin, right? It's a window from which that industry didn't see us. It's also a door upon which we weren't knocking hard in the way that we were knocking on those other doors. And now I think there's a convergence. But for me, and sometimes, I get asked at the college, why do you have this big focus on entrepreneurship, this alternative finance effort? And for me, it's the last leg of the civil rights movement that Dr. King, our most famous alumni, represented. And it's about intergenerational wealth creation. And that has long-term impact for an institution like Morehouse.
And I think it's interesting because often when we think about finance, we're thinking about the big banks, we're thinking about the household names. So Tony, can you explain, like in your perspective, why it's important to start recruiting for alternative finance now, private equity, getting folks in the door in this sector of finance?
Sure. So to many folks, alt finance is actually a term that's not easily understood. But in its simplest form, the financial sector of the United States is extraordinarily large. That most people know. And large banks are lending to often big companies, to governments, even to individuals, whether it's car loans or home loans, et cetera. The alt finance industry is basically a direct lender, a private equity investor, a real estate buyer, and actually just using Ares Management, of which I help to grow. We have, as Dr. Thomas just mentioned, we have maybe 2,000 employees. We touch, we lend, we invest in over 1,500 companies. So we have, shall we say, a bit more reach than just our employee base.
Right.
And again, to talk to entrepreneurship, to talk to, if you will, economic empowerment for many communities, particularly the African American community, access to mentorship and to capital is precisely what changes communities, what changes opportunities. And again, we've said this over and over, you know, if you're here to kind of make a statement versus make an impact, if you want to make an impact, you have to figure out how to rejigger the playing field to a degree. And to me, at least, waiting for the public sector to do things, you could wait a very long time. And the private sector has an ability with university leaders, with college leaders, with the world of academia, with folks like Marcus that are willing to take on this type of function where you could get several firms to commit themselves to create more inclusion, more diversity in their industry over a period of time, with dollars, with mentorship, with training, with curriculum. That to me is what I think, as Dr. Thomas again said, this is what this world requires today. It's both good business and the right thing to do. And I think we're seeing it, and hopefully the alt finance industry is leading by example at least. That's the hope. That's the expectation. A lot of pressure on Marcus to make sure that's the facts.
And we'll stand up to that.
And over the past few years, we have seen, like I said, progress. We've seen commitments. For example, Goldman Sachs, they have a commitment to hire and recruit for more HBCUs. Bank of America has committed, I think, $10 million towards this effort as well. But this isn't the first time that corporations have stated their intentions to recruit. So this is a question for any of you. Like, what makes you optimistic that the goals that you all have now when it comes to getting more black talent within alternative finance firms will work out better than we've seen in the past?
Well, again, I'll defer to Marcus and Dr. Thomas on this, but please understand, we said if we can get 3 meaningful firms, all with significant reach, Apollo Management, Oaktree, Ares Management, if we could get 3 firms to commit $90 million to make sure over the next 10 years we could go to high-quality colleges with African American students that want to be in our industry, and we could help, with assistance in a partnership, help train and mentor, provide scholarships, but be assured that we are committed to hire over the next 10 years in real numbers, that could impact an industry. And we think that's how you lead by example. Maybe Marcus or David, you guys could talk more specifically, but this is doing something with a plan that we're committed to over an extended period of time that should in fact transform our industry.
And for this, before I let Marcus hop in, are there like certain metrics that you all are looking at as this program takes off to make sure that there are steps?
I think there are. Yeah, so there are certainly metrics that we're looking at, but we also are doing something that has never been done before. The alternative investment industry, by and large, used investment banking as a pipeline for recruiting talent. The networks that Dr. Thomas talked about is something that was not made available to many of the students. High quality talent, high performing talent that's coming out of historically black colleges and universities. What we're doing is saying we're starting with our initial fellowship class this year. We're going to have 20 to 25 students in that platform. We'll re-up that and grow that over a 10-year period until we make a dent. And again, you're not looking at thousands or tens of thousands, but if we have hundreds of people that are at these companies over that period of time, then we would have significantly transformed the wealth gap for people that are working in that industry, but more importantly, created a multiplier effect for people that are at companies that are being invested in, for people that are in deal flow, for people that look up to people, right, and can build familiarity with people that are in that industry. So there's a significant multiplier effect. I think to your earlier point, Jordyn, around why this industry in this point in time, coaching and mentoring, building networks, and letting people know what the playbook for success is in this industry. This is a high-performing industry that requires high performance in training, and so our ability to give that to students is something that we're incredibly proud of.
Yeah, it's a good question. What makes me more optimistic? And truth in advertising, 2 weeks ago I turned 65. Right?
Happy belated.
Thank you.
You're a lot older than I am.
And so I have grown up in the period where, we had the civil rights movement, we had affirmative action, we had diversity now. And I see the ways in which the last 2 years have revealed how far we've come and how far we haven't come. And what makes me optimistic right now is I've seen a different level of engagement and conversation among leaders of the industries and organizations that can impact this. Also, I think institutions like Morehouse, and for that matter, Spelman and Clark, our companion schools in the Atlanta University Center, we're now also being selective about the partnerships we engage in. So that, because since George Floyd, lots of companies have knocked on my door, right? And for the companies that want to be in the old mode of what I call drive-bys, right? We want to flow in, maybe we collect some students, we're out, and we can put on, our broadcast or whatever that we're more. But we're partnering with institutions that share our values and also are willing to make long-term commitments and put in place the infrastructure to make sure that it doesn't die. And as Tony said, I'm a lot older than him by 3.5 years.
Marcus, you're next. We're going to you.
So he'll be around 3.5 years longer than I. But when Tony and I go our ways, there's actually an infrastructure that makes sure that 10-year proposition is delivered on, and that those institutions are also investing in our institutions such that if this initiative went away, we would have progress that wouldn't go away, even in the next 2 years. And at Morehouse, we see, in addition to the Alt Finance Initiative, we've had other companies and foundations come who want to invest in a very different way than at least I've seen. And the other great thing about initiatives like this one is it's not just about one company, right? It's about a domain and impacting a domain. So, it's not whether Aries gets, 5 interns, but it's really about what happens in the industry. And so we're looking at really changing domains as opposed to changing companies. And I think that makes a huge difference from where we were, in the different eras of at least my work over the last 40 years that's been at this intersection of race and corporate America.
So the intentionality you're seeing.
So the intentionality and the nature of the intentionality and connecting it to how we do business.
Right.
Right.
And this might be a question for Marcus. I know that with Alt Finance, you guys are focusing on a few campuses right now, Morehouse being one, Spelman, Clark, Atlanta. Do you have plans to expand to other HBCU campuses? And if so, which ones?
Absolutely. So we started off with the 4 partners because of the work that Dr. Thomas and Tony talked about, that there are people that were dedicated to helping partner with us to make this a success early on. But we're also partnering with Jordyn to create a broader platform that will be available to all historically Black colleges and universities. And it's really about giving students access to some of the skills and knowledge that will help them augment their way in kind of what I call the 21st century financial literacy, right? Years ago, 30, 40 years ago, it's about balancing a checkbook. Mm-hmm. Today, every student that will go through this program will have an understanding of reading a P&L, understanding how to translate that back to their own personal finance, understanding what a term sheet looks like, right? Some of the more advanced topics, the things that are important for alternative finance or alternative investments. So I think that certainly we want to have an influence across all historically Black colleges and universities, but we'll continue to work with partners to deploy what I would say a more high-touch model. And the universities like Morehouse, Spelman, Howard, and Clark have been a great partner in starting that.
Because it's curious, because HBCUs, there's about 100, a little over 100 of them in the U.S. So what impact do you think that could have to make sure that you have resources for folks who aren't at those 3 campuses?
So I think the number one, and of the 4 campuses.
Thank you for helping me count.
The number one most important thing for Alt Finance is to make sure that there's no student that if they have a desire to go into the alternative investment industry, does not know where to start, does not know where to build those relationships, does not have an awareness of the firms or how those businesses make money. We've been there, and it's a very difficult proposition to overcome if you don't know what that looks like. So now, the brightest students at these schools will have the opportunity to walk into an interview with one of these companies, should they choose, and say, you know what, I understand how this company makes money, I have an understanding of private credit, private debt, real estate, all of the facets of alternative finance, and that's step 1. From there, these are high-performing students. They will succeed, but building those networks and exposure is step number 1.
And Tony, you mentioned earlier about like this accountability factor when it comes to firms within the private sector. Can you speak a little bit more about like what makes you hopeful that private sector holding itself accountable when it comes to recruiting Black talent is the way to go?
Well, again, it's not just recruiting Black talent, in my opinion, but it's actually positioning these young men and women to succeed. And many of these young folks have a much tougher situation than I did when I started. Because when I started, there were a whole lot of folks, senior folks, that were mentors at the firm I started at, that looked like me, that were helping me, that I knew or knew of somehow. Many of these young people don't have that benefit. That's a disadvantage. So our job is to even the playing field. And I would argue that the curriculum that Marcus just described, the young men and women that are coming from these quality institutions, they are hitting the ground running. And yes, it's the private sector, it's firms like ours, who have to go out of their way to make sure we even the playing field. And historically, for a whole bunch of reasons, some obvious, some not so obvious, but historically people weren't trying to truly level the playing field, create mentorship, to permit people coming into this industry, hitting the ground running, that haven't had a history in this industry and didn't have mentorship, frankly, of folks that looked like them and were looking and trying to help them along in their career. So I would argue that many parts of what we're trying to do is, I would argue, I would hope, trying to be, if you will, a research laboratory, not just for the alt finance industry, but for the entire financial sector, really for every industry in America. Come up with a method by which you could create a more inclusive business or industry and even the playing field. And I do think our model, we were laughing about this before, is it the perfect model? We're going to find out over the next 10 years. But we think it's financed. We think we have high-quality partners. We have superb institutions that are partnering with us. Again, we've started the process. We know young men and women of color want to be in our industry and, frankly, just want to be treated fairly. And that's what I think this structure will help create. We'll find out.
You know, it's great as an academic to be on the stage with a finance guy who talks about, you know, hypotheses and research questions. You know, I love it. But what I think is also powerful about this approach that's different from what I've seen in the past is by putting HBCUs like Morehouse and Spelman and Clark and others at the center of it, we're starting with places that are what I call pure channels for black talent. Right? So I was dean at Georgetown for 6 years, great institution, but you can't go to Georgetown and find 2,000 black men in one place who might be, right, the talent that you're searching for. You might go and find one or two. By coming to institutions like ours, you increase the likelihood of finding that talent. And also what happens in those firms at a scale that might not happen if all you were doing was going to places where you find onesies and twosies. And where you create scale, you open it up for people in those other institutions. 'Cause part of what influences decisions like who you bring into an industry is who you see there. And if in 5 years we've actually changed who's there, people will also see the students who are not at, you know, Morehouse or Spelman, all right? And they will also find their way there. My students who are at Georgetown will hear from their colleagues who are at Morehouse, hey, have you thought about alternate finance? And it's influencing that network. And what I've seen in the past, it was institutions would say, well, where did we go to school? Right?
You bet.
And well, we went to Georgetown, we went to Harvard, we went to Yale, let's go there and find them. And they wouldn't think, where are they in large numbers? Where's the pure channel? And for me, Morehouse and Spelman and Clark, we are pure channels of black talent. You want to find it? It's you know, it's kind of like Nickelodeon, right? If you had little kids, you didn't wake up and say, let's watch a little CBS, but you would sit your kids in front of Nickelodeon because you know what's going to come out of the channel. Same thing when you come to Morehouse. You know when you turn on that spigot what's going to come out, and you increase the likelihood of finding that talent, and that then influences what happens at other institutions that are predominantly white.
It
and
is
the
so true.
opportunities they see.
I mean, what Dr. Thomas, for 30 years, I actually ran a financial institution in alt finance.
Yes.
The people that led recruiting, you would say to them,
Where do you go to school?
go figure it out. And what would they do? They would go to the colleges they attended and recruit. Generally people that look like them. And the truth of the matter is you have to recreate that playing field where you don't create the flexibility of just let everyone who heads recruiting go where they think best, where they feel most comfortable, but you got to widen the fairway. And I would say alt finance, what we're trying to create in our industry is widening that fairway. I don't think we're the only industry that needs to be doing it, but I assure you we're one of them.
And we have to wrap up, but quick. As you said, this could be a structure for other industries. So with that in mind, what's one actionable step that if someone's trying to diversify their industry through recruitment and making sure that they retain talent, what would they do first?
Well, I'm going to argue that they should probably call Marcus or David to make sure they understand what alt finance is as a model. But there are so many companies trying to, Goldman Sachs deserves credit. I don't know, if it's so popular. They said they will not take a company public unless there are 2 people of color on the board before they would take a company public. That's something the private sector has led, and something that does immediately force people to change the way they look at that. So all I'm saying is take good ideas that are helping move the ball and share them.
Dr. Thomas?
I would say, one, make a long-term commitment that you put a stake in the ground in, and two, look for institutions that have already proven that they can produce the talent that you're looking for and partner with them and scale what they are already doing. The great thing about where we are today is that we have all the models we need. The question is investing in them so they can scale.
Yeah, I agree.
Marcus?
So I'll have two as well. Number one, be intentional from the top. We did not get here through being unintentional, and we will not get from here by being unintentional. So be intentional. Number two, close the gap early, right? We see this in sports. We all have young kids that go to trainers, and we send them to a trainer to play basketball or football or whatever, and we close that gap early. We've got to do the same around talent. And so when companies see young talent that have all the raw skills to be good, work with organizations like Alt Finance to help provide the mentorship, the curriculum, and the pathway to be successful in closing that gap.
Awesome. Well, all three of you, thank
Jordyn,
you so much.
Thank you for this.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone.
Yeah.
It's actually the first meeting I've been to in 3 or 4 years where no one's asked me a basketball question.
We still have time. No, I'm kidding.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
What I love about this, you asked before, is it's changed now, right now. It's not planning it, hoping for the next 4 years, maybe somebody will pass this legislation. We can affect change right now. Go to Operation Hope, go to Building Black Business at ATL.com, sign up, learn. You can do this without having to go to a traditional 4-year college, get the money to pay for it, take out loans and grants to do that. Maybe you'll get a job then. This is for people that actually have businesses now too, maybe a sole proprietorship or whatnot now. Go through, learn it, and get smarter.
Exciting news, huh? All right, well, we're going to keep things moving with another important conversation talking about leading change in the C-suite. Help me welcome the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the National Urban League, Mr. Dan Cravins, all right, and the Chairman, President, and CEO of Georgia Power, Mr. Chris Womack, and the one and only best selfie taker in America, Mr. Roland Martin.
I don't know. Y'all sit down.
Which ones you want?
They gave us a list on how to sit down. Y'all sit down when y'all want to sit down.
Why don't you take the middle, man?
We grown ass men. Sit down. Anyway, they got rules. Y'all sit here. Go to the far left or far right. John got everything scripted. They had in the script, we can go to the bathroom. I'm like, come on. How we doing? Y'all got to do better than that. How we doing? I'm trying to make sure everybody in this room is awake. All right, so glad we're here. We're going to have a great conversation. They have given us, hey, y'all got to change the clock. Y'all only got 7 minutes. About please wrap up. Damn, we just sat down. Like grand opening, grand closing. All right.
Hello and goodbye.
Yeah, let's get right to it. I think they sent y'all some prepared questions. I won't be asking any of them, so don't worry about whatever they sent y'all.
We knew that. We knew that.
I don't read from those. We talk about the power of the C-suite, and one of the issues that I have is that you have numerous folks. You've had generations fighting for African Americans to be on boards, to be CEOs, to be executives, to be in senior leaders. But we're still dealing with some of our folk who are only benefiting themselves and not the collective.
Right, right.
How do we effectively challenge them to say, you're not sitting in those positions just for you? It's about expanding the opportunities for all.
No, and I look at it this way. Here at Georgia Power, part of Southern Company, the responsibility is we've got a bunch of stakeholders, and they're all bigger than me, bigger than individuals, whether it's customers, whether it's employees, whether it's investors, but also there's a community out there that is looking for us to provide value and benefit to them as well. And so I think if you look at it the right way, you're gonna say, this is not just about me, but I've got a platform to do something to help somebody, to help a community. How do I use my creativity, how I use this company to make investments, to leverage, to collaborate, to help make people's lives better. And I saw David Thomas was just here from Morehouse, and so a year or so ago, we made a commitment of $50 million to historically black colleges and universities, coming out of a conversation that I had with one of our board members, a guy named David Grain, who had facilitated a conversation in Silicon Valley about the lack of diversity in Silicon Valley. And so we're saying, let's address that, let's fix that by helping David and other HBCUs enhance their curriculum to help students understand data analytics, to understand coding and other technical fields so they can go work in Silicon Valley companies. So that's some of the stuff that I think is part of the mindset and the philosophy that we must have as we assume these roles of leadership.
No, but for me, I believe it has to be 360 degree. What I mean by that is there are a lot of companies who want the applause. So, oh, we have the scholarships, or we fund this initiative with the Urban League or the NAACP, whereas I'm saying, no. I want to know, what is your spending on black-owned media, black law firms, black engineering firms, black accounting firms, black publicists, black transportation companies. You're using car service, black catering companies, black event planners, black audio sound. It has to be a much broader conversation, because we are long past being happy to see an African American in the C-suite. No, how are you delivering in a 360-degree way?
Well, Brother Martin, I said this at the Urban League just after the murder of George Floyd. What we have seen is that many corporate citizens had an inflection point. Some of them are people who have given money to the Urban League and organizations like the Urban League for generations. And to those people, we've said, thank you, we will continue to do the good work. Some, it was an awakening for them. And all of a sudden, they came to us and said, we want to do more to help the Urban League. What I've said to those companies is, I hope that it's not a flash in the pan, a one-time giving. I hope that it is the end to corporate philanthropic redlining, because that's what it has been. Organizations like the Urban League and others, we've been trying to do this work for many, many years. We have been asking for diversity on the C-suite level for many, many years, and some of that has been met with no, and just pure racism and get out of our face. Some of it has been met with, well, here's some money, go do something good in your community. But we're not gonna tell you how many blacks we have on staff. We're not gonna tell you how many black businesses we do business with. And what we are saying to them, what I am saying to them is, one without the other is not good enough. It's how we've gotten to this point in our nation's history. To your point, we can't just count on black folks to fix black folks' problems. And that's what this philanthropy in some regards, and look, I appreciate the corporate giving that we get from many of our corporate partners, and Georgia Power supports our urban leagues here. We're gonna do what we can with the resources we can, but we need more resources, and we need to know that the people in those companies look like us, sound like us. And you asked the question to Brother Womack, and I want to answer it. I served some time in corporate America. You brought up, Brother Martin, about the some of us in corporate America don't look out for some of us, and you're very correct about that. What I'll say about that is corporate America even has a culture that does breed this feeling as an African American, it's got to be just me.
Right.
And then what I have experienced in corporate America, and I'll just say it, is people who look like us were sometimes the people who I had to look out for. Because
I can tell you, in the conversations that we've had when it comes to getting advertising, the first person in some conversations go, Roland, you controversial, is the black folks. I'm like, I need you to shut the hell up. Because y'all ain't got a problem spending money on MSNBC and Fox News. Are you calling them controversial? No, I'm just being honest. And so, see, this is, it's an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of us because what happens is we say, well, we don't want to criticize somebody. And Chris, I know you felt it, but here's the deal. If I'm in your position, you should be saying, no, challenge me to do what's right. Don't just sit here and say, well, I don't want to say nothing about the, look, I had a lot of people, Obama got mad at me when he was the president.
Yeah.
And I told him and his people, I said, y'all thought I was joking before the election, huh? I said, no, there's a return on investment. And if you want somebody to carry your water, there's going to be some expectation when you get in to use your power for good. I said, now if I criticize the previous 43, you damn right I'm going to criticize 44. Now I ignored 45, but I'm going to jam up 46. But that really has to be our position.
No, and it does, and you have to hold us accountable. Yeah, we got to hold ourselves accountable. I mean, I've got to make sure that I'm saying when I move on from where I am, I'm helping other people grow and develop. I'm making sure that I identify opportunities for black folks to do business for the company. And yeah, I've got to make sure I do that. And you and others have got to say, Womack, what have you done? And yeah, I feel good about what we have done, but I got to continue to do more.
Roland, let's put the blame where it belongs, not on the one or two brothers and sisters who were the lucky ones. 1% of the Fortune 500 have a black CEO, 1%. We are 13% of the population is 2021. We've had an African-American president, but yet we still can't run the titans of this country. We are expected to participate as Americans. We are told all the time, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, black folks. And yet when you look at the participation on the C-suite, the boards of directors of these companies are in the positions of CEO, those doors have been closed to us, and they're not opening. If you look at the bench, who becomes the CEO typically at a company? It's the person who runs the profits and losses, the CFOs, the chief operating officers. If you look at those positions, gentlemen, those positions are largely white men. They're not women. We do the human resources. We're hired to do diversity, equity, inclusion. By and large, those are not the positions that rise to become CEOs of the company. So if you even look at the benches that these companies are creating, we're not even on the bench, Roland.
But this is also, again, you're absolutely right in terms of where you place it. But I'm still going to challenge even our own when they do get in positions of power, because remember when Brian Gumbel interviewed Mike Tomlin about the lack of black head coaches, and Mike Tomlin was commenting, and so Shannon Sharp blasted Mike Tomlin saying, wait a minute, Mike, you've been an NFL head coach for 14 years and you've never hired a black coordinator. So it's also when you do get in, how do you open the door to say, no, I'm gonna create my own coaching tree, my own executive tree, and that's also sort of how I think how we have to challenge folks that when you get in, are you expanding the opportunities?
Agreed.
Identifying the people, because to your point, look, you're not going to be there forever, but you want to be able to have a coaching tree or an executive tree that comes behind you.
No, absolutely, and we get in the position, I can't not say, okay, well, I can't talk about diversity. I can't talk about race issues. I got to still be the champion. I mean, I've got to be the one leading the charge and making sure that I'm developing the bench, making sure that whether it's the finance organization or operations, it is full of people of color, of diverse people in all parts of the business. So there is a succession plan, succession tree available to fill this seat. And so, I mean, that's what we have to do. I mean, everybody's got to hold us accountable, our employees, our community. If we do that, we'll get there. I mean, there are a lot of good conversations that are taking place today. And I do think we have an opportunity to do things that we've never done before and to really make some changes that otherwise would not have happened. But we got to hold ourselves accountable. We got to stay to it. It's a long journey, and we got to stay committed, and I think we can get it done.
John, you mentioned George Floyd, and there were a lot of people, there are a lot of companies, some here, that made announcements, that made pronouncements, that issued press releases, that people applauded. I've said to folk, I'm not giving you credit for a press release.
And you shouldn't.
I'm going to give you credit when you deliver on what you put in the press release.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so that's also, I think, what has to happen. And I know, I'm sure our frat brother Mark was a little uncomfortable. I had him on the show, and I talked about Pepsi. And I'm not picking on Pepsi, I'm just using an example because I think we also have to be thinking differently when we're having these conversations. So Pepsi has a 10-year, 5-year commitment with the International Urban League to stand up black businesses, fully support, $10 million. They have an initiative where they want to drive $100 million over 5 years to black-owned restaurants. But Pepsi spends about $3 billion a year on marketing. If Pepsi committed 5% of its marketing dollars to black-owned media, that would be $150 million a year, $750 million over 5 years. $10 million to the Urban League over 5 years, $100 million they want to drive in receipts to black-owned restaurants, but $750 million could go to black-owned businesses over a 5-year period. That's the number. And I think we have to be making a level of demands of companies that are different. And that's why I'm saying we have to be far more specific in that we appreciate the support of civil rights organizations, but the real flow of resources is when it comes to the companies, and that's the demand. And we must be that specific with every single company, whether you're Wells Fargo, whether you're Bank of America, whether you're Citi, whether you are in whatever industry, because, again, philanthropic support is one thing,
right,
but standing up and supporting and investing in black-owned and minority business is a completely different thing.
Absolutely.
But and Roland, you make an excellent point. After May 25th, George Floyd's death, and I think it was the BET Awards. If you go back and look at some of the ads and it was some great.
Oh, no. Do you need them? Because I wrote them all down.
Okay, but it was.
Because I posted on Instagram every single one of them. Go ahead.
It was some phenomenal creative work that was done.
Y'all think I'm lying. Keep going.
And so I do think, and whether it's press releases or whether it was wonderful creative, yeah, we got to hold ourselves accountable for what did we do after that. I mean. No.
I want you to put a pin in that, because here's the deal. Because, see, again, this is where the game comes in. They hired black and minority creatives to produce the spots and paid them. What I said is, no. Yeah. But are you also running ads on black-owned media? So what happens is they want us to be happy. No, but we hire some black creatives. I'm saying, no. We want that pot and that pot.
Yeah, and so that's one of the conversations I know that we have internal. What are we doing today? I mean, not just what we did in June or July of 2020, but are we still on this journey? What progress? I mean, what advancements? What causes are we continuing to invest in that we talked about back in May and June of 2020? And I think that's something we got to all hold ourselves accountable to as companies.
Roland,
Don, this is business. We're not talking a handout conversation.
No, that's right.
We're saying there are actual businesses, and I need people to understand when we talk about businesses, specifically African American. Prior to COVID, there were 2.6 million black-owned businesses in America. 2.5 million had one employee, doing an average revenue of $54,000.
That's right.
So the problem is we really only have 100,000 black-owned businesses.
Right, that have employees, that have capacity to really.
They have more than one employee.
That's right.
So you can't even break down how many of them have 2 or 3.
Right.
When I launched my show 3 years ago, the day I launched, I was in the top 5 percentile of black-owned business employees. So going from launching the business, going from that to $3 million a year, 3 years later, yes. I am actually doing better than 95% of all black-owned businesses in America. That's in 3 years.
Right.
That's crazy. So it's a capacity conversation that has to happen. And companies, when we talk about C-suites, we talk about who you're doing business with, the challenge has to be there. And then we talk about whole accountability. No. What is it this year? What is it next year?
Yeah.
Then what's the benchmark the following year? As opposed to, hey, we got a diversity award of being a great place for minorities to work.
That's right.
But we can't live on accolades, okay?
Because we can't deposit awards.
And so that's my thing. I mean, yeah. Give me an award, I'll take a photo with it, but I can't stand on that.
I ain't never deposited a selfie.
Okay, no, so we can't live on accolades. And so all the work we're doing, one of the things we're gonna do is end of the year, we're gonna do what I call a transformation report that will highlight everything that we're doing. Now I'm gonna benchmark ourselves against other companies to say, okay, am I good, bad, or indifferent, and where is it I can get better? And I'm gonna do that every year. Every year we're going to do a transformation. We're going to grade ourselves.
That's right.
And I'm going to have somebody come in and audit to say, how well are we doing?
But
I think that's the way we get better.
That's right.
But Roland, you're making the case for this panel The reason why things are the way they are is because we don't have people who grew up like we did, know people that we know, go to church where we go, know that black businesses are very small businesses. And so if those people don't don't work in the businesses, they don't sit in the C-suite, they don't have a chairman and CEO like this gentleman, they just don't know. So a lot of that conversation, that frustration that I hear in your voice, we feel it, we live it, is that PTSD of being a black American until we diversify the C-suite. We're really speaking in a vacuum. And so that is the reason for this panel today is, you're right, you bring up, we can have both. We can have philanthropic, but we need supplier diversity. But if no one in that room understands anything you and I are talking about today, or Chris is talking about today, it doesn't happen.
Well, and the thing is, one of the things that we are, and I get it, I understand, and we're afraid to, a lot of us are afraid to call folks out, to challenge folks. Martin Depp has a great book about Operation Breadbasket, 1966, 1971, that created the opportunities for many African-American businesses in Chicago. That was really one of the lasting things of Dr. King, and the idea came from Reverend Leon Sullivan. And I had a friend, he said, you know, Roland, you know, do you have to be so aggressive in calling companies out? Yes. And I had another friend who said, well, can you do this quietly? I said, show me how that's worked for me so far. See, at some point, you have to get some people's attention by alerting their customer base who's not doing business with us. And if anybody say, that's not me, all you should do is go to April 3rd, 1968 and listen to Dr. King's speech from Mason Temple in Memphis, where he specifically said in the speech, Jesse, what do you call it? Redistribute the pain. And what has to happen is, and I'm not saying this requires launching massive boycotts of companies. I'm saying we can knock 1, 2, or 3 points off your market share, and some folks probably will then lose their job. Because at some point, and see, I'm not, and I get that things take time. Here's the deal. I'm not interested in waiting. I'm 52, okay? We don't know how long we all got. I'm not interested in a 30-year conversation.
Yeah.
No, I want to know, change it in 3, 2, 1. Capacity is here, opportunity is here. You got to have folks who are simply willing to do it. And I think we're just going to be a lot more aggressive in making that demand.
Yeah. No, you do, and make the ask. Don't be afraid to make the ask. I mean, don't be afraid to have the conversation.
And not the small ask.
And not the small ask. I mean, the big ask.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
you can say the big ass.
Yes.
You said the big ass.
No, I didn't want to say that because we're being recorded.
But you almost said the big ass.
No,
I said it. Go ahead.
No,
because I have no problem asking for all of the money.
But make the ask and engage in the dialogue. I mean, I do think, and I understand exactly what you're saying. I do think companies now are, in fact, more sensitive than they ever have been to these issues. Yes, we got to keep the conversations going. We got to make the ask. We got to follow up to see what has been done.
Apply pressure when necessary.
Apply pressure when necessary.
Absolutely.
I mean, because, yeah, I do think things are different now. And the thing I say to our company, and I say to all of us, we have this wonderful moment in time.
That's right. Roland, you brought up something.
We have this wonderful moment. We can't let it pass.
And so,
we can't let it go by.
But on the moment, Reverend Barber's been calling it this year, and I've been with him as well. This literally is the third Reconstruction. Mm-hmm. And both the previous 2 Reconstructions, they were about changing laws with civil rights, but the one area where they failed was economics.
Yeah.
This has to be an economic change.
Now is the time.
Yes. You know what, when you and I are in the same age group, Roland, when we saw George Floyd and we had to explain to our children, to our teenage, and I've got 2 20-year-olds, what we put up with in our generations, our children are not willing to put up with that stuff anymore. And you're right about it has to stop now. There is no more time to wait. My children kept asking me why. And I had no responses to the why other than that's just the way it's always been. Yep. And I started to even feel like a deficient parent, as a deficient black man, when I had to look my children in the face and they said, but why does it have to be that way? We know better. We're better than we've ever been. We're more educated than we've ever been. We've been through this before, Daddy. Yep. Why? And so to your point, Roland, we can't wait anymore.
It doesn't have to be that way.
And I think that in what we're seeing, and I'll be honest, the reason I think you saw the corporate response wasn't because black folks were protesting, because they saw a lot of white folks protesting. And they were like, oh, hell, nah. Because if you study history, in the period after the Civil War, poor whites and freed slaves began to make substantive changes
Absolutely.
across the South. Dr. King mentioned that in his speech in Montgomery after the 7 Montgomery March.
Yep.
And he talked about that, and you had what they called the Bourbon class that said, oh, we cannot have this happening. That's what we saw. But the challenge for white allies has to be, don't just show up to the George Floyd protests for 2 or 3 weeks. Where are you a year later when they haven't passed the bill in Congress? That has to continue, and it has to be continuous inside the companies as well if we're going to see the kind of change in C-suites as well as when it comes to the companies. Final comment.
No, now is the time, and to your point, we also have to make sure that our white friends of goodwill, not let them be silent. Okay, as the philosopher Frantz Fanon would say, silence is dishonesty. We cannot let them be silent. Now is the time. Let's not miss this opportunity.
We need to educate our young people that working in corporate America is not a bad thing either, as well, though. We need brothers and sisters in corporate America. We need our next titans, our next CEOs, CFOs, chief operating officers in corporate America to be our young people, to be us. And so let's educate our young people to go be good corporate citizens in corporate America so we can change some of these systems you talked about, Brother Martin.
My final comment is real simple, and that is, I've started every job with the premise, I'm gonna get fired anyway.
Just a matter of time.
So you can be the model employee who shows up work early, who stays late, and then when you get laid off, now you at home and you mad as hell. Because you like, damn it, I did everything right, and I don't have a job. Whereas me, I'm gonna say what the hell I need to say while I'm there, and if y'all get rid of me, I'm at home going, hell, I said everything I need to say while I was there. There are some people who are parking lot militants, and there's some people who use their voice on the inside of the company.
Yes.
I dare say, and we all have different styles, but it's very simple. If you are in a company and you have left no footprints or no fingerprints, you have wasted a career.
No question.
This is the opportunity for us to literally redefine America in the image that it should be, because we are not going back to the country that we used to be.
That's right.
It's not happening. It's simply not.
It's not gonna happen.
And so either we make the shift now and we change what is happening, or we're going to have a bigger problem in the future. And that means supporting and investing in, yes, those companies, folks with black-owned media who are willing to tell a story, and also stop using the buzzwords that we all know, who you're afraid of, who's not the right type of person, because the reality is you sometimes need that strong voice that doesn't give a damn, who's willing to change the system. Boo, I see you waving in the back. We good. Thank you very much. We are out of time. Hope y'all enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would tell young girls to believe in yourself. Understand it's not about you. It's about the good of all, the good of people. Get involved. You stand as one, but you are 10,000 behind you. And for each stride that you make, you're bringing others along with you.
You can kind of fit what the job, expects you to fit and be kind of at the reserved regulator who doesn't, put her emotions out there. Or you can basically make the job fit you.
Community is capital. And when you think about your community, don't just think about the residents, the neighbors. Think about the local businesses. Go out into your communities and make your communities better. And we want to do that around the world.
Everyone has power. I think the question becomes, what trees do you plant? How to use the power where you are to stand up at this moment and say, I'm going to hold myself first and others accountable.
We didn't do very much in the rebuilding after the last recession for women and people of color. Let's equity lens to the way we rebuild. Let's not rebuild and leave women out of a chance to get high-paying jobs. I think it's essential for our democracy to rebuild with this equity lens. It's go big or go home.
Special guest speaker today, the first African-American woman to own a billion-dollar company.
She started the company in 1976 with just a few $100s. She's now ranked by Forbes as second wealthiest self-made African-American woman in America, behind only Ms. Oprah Winfrey.
Act One is one of the largest staffing companies in the United States. He's also the first African-American ever named by the Star Group as one of the 50 leading women entrepreneurs in the world.
Janice and I were recently both honored at the BET Honors Awards, and she is a true inspiration.
She spent almost 40 years helping others find work. She could fill a book with her words of wisdom.
Do you feel like the climate has changed for women, and especially for minority women?
Let's be clear, the climate has changed, but it's not sunny weather.
This journey is not one that I consider having reached success. Rather, I believe I'm on the road of success.
Take two. We're starting to circle the field, but believe me, you really want to be part of this last conversation today. It's going to blow you away, so please give a big Hope Global Forum welcome to the Vice President and oh, no, this is the wrong one. I'm going to introduce you to the founder and CEO of Act One Group. She's been here many years and a longtime supporter of Operation Hope and the Hope Global Forum. It's Ms. Janice Bryant Howard.
Hey, y'all. Hey. So look, they've got me all propped up there, but you know, I'm fully vaccinated and I have a booster that I earned with age. I gotta read this, okay? It's so exciting to be back at Hope Global Forum. Are you happy to be in this room? John Hope Bryant and the Hope family are incredibly supportive of all of us. We talk a lot about diversity, but you know, we've always had diversity. Inclusion is the subject at the moment. And so he's welcomed us to have a conversation today about maximizing our power, living in leadership as women of color. And I am particularly thrilled that I get, as you can see her on the monitor, Miss April Ryan and Renee Montgomery to join us for this discussion. Let me share a little bit about April, although you probably know it. April is a White House correspondent with the unique vantage point of being the only Black female reporter covering urban issues from the White House. Shout it out, okay? And April also is seen daily on CNN as a political analyst and in the Washington, D.C. bureau chief of the GRIO. Now, having been featured in Essence, Vogue, Cosmopolitan, and Elle magazines, she's one of only 3 African Americans in the prestigious White House Correspondents Association, and she served on its board also. She is an author, honorary member of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Got a Delta in the house. Oh, Delta's been here. Delta Airlines, Delta sorority. Okay, we're in Atlanta, right? The ATL. But you know, her award-winning book, The Presidency in Black and White, is a must-read, as is her earlier book, At Mama's Knee, Mothers and Race in Black and White. April's latest book is Under Fire, reporting from the front lines of the Trump White House. Okay, I feel you. And Renee, so please first welcome April, okay? Give her another love. Show your love, show your love. Renee Montgomery. Now, Renee is part owner and vice president of WNBA's Atlanta Dream. She's a West Virginia native, has 3 girls' state basketball championships, and she graduated from UConn as a 2-time All-American in 2009. Renee played on that undefeated team and won a national championship that year, and was then drafted 4th in the WNBA. She's won 2 WNBA championships and was named an All-Star and the 6th Woman of the Year in her 11-year professional career. Check this out, though. Renee retired in 2021 after sitting out the 2020 season to focus on social reform and justice. She now serves as sports analyst for the NBA, ESPN, is host to several media outlets, and of her own weekly podcast. And this is breaking news, she told me backstage. She's rebranding from Remotely Renee to Montgomery & Company so that she can focus on building Black businesses. Please welcome Renee. Hey, love.
You're so good.
We vaccinated. We're vaccinated. We can hug it up. We're vaccinated. Okay, so I'm excited to get this conversation going. We've been waiting a minute for this, right? And Hope Global Forum is the perfect place to have it. I got to ask you this question, and I'm going to start with the question for the both of you. April, I'll begin with you. You've both lived the experience of Black women maximizing your individual power to live in community and business leaderships. Now, it's taken a lot, and you've given a lot. I know in my career, I've had to make decisions sometimes off the cuff. At other times, I've needed to make those decisions in a very strategic way with the full team engaged. And as women, we're stepping into leadership roles that we don't have a blueprint for. We don't have a little black book for. April, what can you share with women about your journey that can be informative to them in maximizing power? And what do the men need to know to support them?
Well, first of all, Janice, thank you. And John Hope Bryant, you know I love you. Thank you so much for having me once again on your great platform. First, how men should support women, allow us to have the shackles off, to go for our dreams and understand it's not threatening when we do that. Once we obtain or work for what we want, we give as much love back as we give out to get that. So that's one thing. It's not something that you should be fearful of. It should be something you should embrace, because we embrace your dreams, embrace ours too. And secondly, I am the Washington bureau chief and a White House correspondent for the GRIO. But as a child growing up, I always wanted to own my own business. I always wanted to have other things going, different projects. And I'm living out my life stream at this moment, from dabbling in real estate, creating generational wealth for my children, as well as bringing young people along to understand that we are part of this equation too. Just because other communities have homes or what have you, it does not mean that we are excluded. We are part of this journey as well, and we have to bring that mindset in. And I believe that we have to maximize the moment, particularly now. I've heard from too many people. They said, make the money you can make now, because tomorrow we just don't know. And this is the moment that we start looking at those hobbies and build them into something more than a hobby, but something as a business. Because I'm sure many people are like, oh, I dabble in this as a hobby. This is just, gas money. Well, gas prices have gone up. This hobby is now, it could be a business. Find areas where your service is needed, where there is a void. And that's what I do. I mean, there's one part of me that's a journalist, but another part of me is the businesswoman, a rising businesswoman, to build something for my children, for the generations to come. So I believe it's imperative upon women, especially now, Black women especially now, as we are looking at being the number one breadwinner in our homes, as we are looking at being the head of household. It's incumbent upon us not to cap our earning potential. So that is my piece. And I believe, again, men, don't be afraid. Come in with us. We'll come in with you as well.
Well, John speaks so deeply, so consistently on the importance of financial literacy. And April hit on that. We are the breadwinners oftentimes for our homes. But I think, Renee, you can give us a perspective from the idea that, one, you were a player.
Yeah.
And now you own the game. Why don't you help? Yeah, give it up to her. Give it up to her. So message a little further for us on this idea of what type of support is needed and what type of thought process women can engage in transitioning into ownership.
You know, it's interesting because when I opted out, I didn't necessarily have all the plans, everything laid out. I just knew I had the want to. And I knew that I had some capabilities. I think in sports, people overlook the things that we're trained, literally trained to do. We're trained in being confident. We're trained in decision making. We're trained in being good teammates, on time, discipline, things that I kind of started to take for granted because it was normal things athletes did. I started to recognize when I opted out and started to work in the real world that people would compliment me on things that I thought were a standard, a normal. And then when you go from being a player, my resume didn't necessarily say that I could handle being an owner. You know, my resume to what people knew didn't necessarily add up to me being an executive, a vice president. But I think it takes people seeing you or seeing the talent, because you see in different cultures where there can be a family line of people, you don't know if he would be the best president, but you know your son is going to be the president of your company because that's your company, and succession. You know, like that's the normal thing, right? So we don't necessarily get that grace. We don't necessarily get that, well, I think you could do it. And I think that's what happened in my case. People, shouts to Northland, Suzanne Hebert, and Larry G., they saw that I was capable. They gave me the chance to prove them right. And a lot of times we don't get that chance for people to prove people right. We have to prove and prove and prove, and then hopefully get a chance. And I think that's the step that really we could take. We have to give grace. A lot of cultures give grace. We don't necessarily give grace as easy as other people could.
Yeah, well, you know, when I think about my livelihood, and I work in an environment, April, where we are escorting people's careers, and very often they're making big decisions about how to brand themselves within their careers, because ownership is important. Ownership of yourself first is dynamic. And I remember having a conversation with Paula Madison, who you probably know, April, well. Paula grew up in the NBC family. She grew up actually in GE and then moved to NBC. And she wanted to take a role behind the camera. She did news for a while. And Paula shared that when she was asked, how can you take on this role and you've never done this before? What do you know about running TV? She said, I'm one of your biggest customers. I know what you're getting wrong. And when you are in DC and you are out there doing one of the toughest jobs ever, covering the White House, you're having to carry your brand, but you're also carrying the brand of so many other women who will get opportunities because of how you're performing. What kind of legitimacy does that bring to how you're able to stay true to your journalistic practices and still build that family and build that business brand that's April Ryan that we all grew to love over these years?
Thank you. And I love you back. And I felt the love at some of the most trying times that still bring tears to my eyes. But we have to remember, we have to be true to ourselves before we are true to anything else. And when I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror, I've got to like me. I've got to like what I did the day before and what I plan to do that day. I've got to like myself before I go into the room to wake my youngest child up to take her to school so she can like me. And when I go into that briefing room, I go in likely understanding that some of these questions are not going to be as palatable as others, but understanding as well. And for everyone who's watching, it's not about me. It is about accountability and asking questions for an underserved community that has the highest numbers of negatives in almost every category. And I'm going to say this, Janet, before I came to the White House, I've been there 24 years. And before I came to the White House, a lot of people weren't constantly asking questions about Black America. And we going through a cycle, policing, still going through that. voting rights. You know, we're going through that. We're voting like we voted in 1963, 64. We're back there now, okay? Policing, we're back there now. We're going back again about Haiti. You know, we dealt with Haiti many times, many years ago with Bill Clinton, with Jean-Bertrand Aristide. But when I walk into that briefing room, I am firm in what the issues are. I am firm in how a question can translate to an administration that either can change the dynamic or it would cause consternation. I don't go in there to cause consternation. I go in there to get answers for a community that's in need. When we watched Haitian migrants a few weeks ago, I mean, it feels like years ago now, but a few weeks ago, we were incensed by the inhumanity of people who look like us being whipped with reins. Inhumane. You go into the briefing room and you ask them, because they are supposedly the moral leaders of the world, but yet we are the same people who tell China about their inhumanity, about their treatment, who tells other communities. So we ask the questions, and when I walk in there, maybe that's the April Ryan brand, but I'm true to those questions. What do they say? I'm not new to this, I'm true to this.
Okay.
That is what we do. I mean, today, voting rights. Chuck Schumer says now, because of the failure in this procedural vote, he's going after it next week. And then tomorrow, if I'm in the briefing room, or Friday, Jen, what is the president going to do? Is he going to deal with the filibuster? I am true to the issues that I focus on. I can ask all types of questions. You heard Sean Spicer go after me for asking about Russia, but he's gone, right? So anyway, but I ask questions that the American public wants. It's not about me. It's never about me. It's about people who need answers. And I, along with those who are in the briefing room, the legitimate press, we're the first line of questioning an American president. And the onus is on me to take it seriously and to ask questions that need answers from the highest office.
Well, you know, that's
and if
one
that's
of the...
my brand, that's it, so be it.
Hey, girl, that's one of the first principles I teach people in my ABCs is ask those right questions and then listen, yes, so you get the right answers. Renee, you were asking questions as a player, and you had to transfer some of what you learned as a player of the game to the boardroom. How did you do that, and what are some of the best lessons you brought from the game to the boardroom?
I think connecting the game to the boardroom, and what I mean by that is basketball is a business, and as athletes we say it, but we don't think about it. We think about the game we play, and we think about shooting, X's and O's, but taking that to the boardroom, what does that mean? Well, players always want the flash, you want the glitz, you want the glam. First of all, you gotta win, and players need to understand that. So I took a realistic approach in a sense of, this is what you want, this is how we both can get there. I think that there was this disconnect that players and management don't talk so much. I don't know why, but it's like there was this bar in between us. And so I think just lifting it, like now I'm a player that's an owner, so I feel you, and I'm here too now to help you and help us. And I think that that's changing everything. Players will write me and be like, hey, can we get more than one parking pass? And I'm like, that's a no-brainer. You know, like simple stuff, right?
You know that environment.
I know that environment. So then I start to think of things that as a player that I wish, simple things too, that if the ownership group probably knew they would have done, but they didn't know because it didn't make it there. So what I bring is the human approach in a sense.
Oh, you got to be on somebody's corporate board. You got to be able to help with that.
Yeah, I would love to, and it's just bringing the human approach to it. I think that a lot of times everyone feels so different, but as athletes, we all want the same thing. If the more that the athletes are booming, the more our brand is booming as the Atlanta Dream, the more everything's booming. So if you have a podcast as a player, no, we don't mind you having a podcast. Build your brand. That builds our brand. And trying to get everyone to understand that if we're all have the same goal in mind, how we go about it, we can figure it out.
Amen, amen. Hey, listen, ladies, I want each of you to really join the spirit of hope and leave this audience with the one message you most hope they carry from your conversation. Let's do it in 30 seconds.
Let's do it.
April.
My hope is for the audience, and particularly women, Black women, believe in yourself. Believe. Build your self-esteem up to carry you into those doors and spaces and places that you never dreamed, because you never know where you'll land when you get there.
Amen, right? Amen.
Listen, I would say my hope would be that you create your own momentum, create your own moment. I think a lot of times we wait and see, well, where can we get in? What's the nicest way to do it? What's the best way? Bust it down. Like, just bust it down and just create your own moment, create your own momentum. Just do it. Like, I think that everybody waits for the moment. It's now.
Yeah, and when we talk about this moment is now, a lot of what you're teaching is ensuring that this moment becomes a movement. We heard a lot of that conversation, right? As we were at home and in COVID, make this moment a movement. Yep. And I'm so thrilled that that's what you ladies are doing. I'm gonna share something. I love to scratch a lot. And I scratched this out when I landed in Atlanta night before last. And I wanna share it. Last night when I arrived in town and hadn't yet seen a thing, I rested my luggage on the ground and my phone began to ring. I answered, and to my joy, Mama was calling me. You know what she said, stay well in God's eyes, because that's where I should always be. And then Mama started to sing, and bring us hope in every word you say. Bring us hope in every prayer you pray. This world is big, life is so small. Our future's out of scope. Above it all, we can rise tall and bring each other hope. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much.
And wait a minute, we need to give a round of applause. I know she had an intro, but I'm honored to just be here with you. When I talk about busting doors down, I wouldn't be sitting here as an owner if you didn't bust down a lot of doors. So I think we need to give you an unreal round of applause. Set the tone.
April, I kind of adopted her backstage. We were back there having fun. Your ears must have been burning.
You can adopt me too.
Come on with it, April.
We were just loving you up. Let's adopt each other and let's do like Mama said. We can stand tall and we can really raise each other up.
Yes.
We can bring hope. Thank you.
There she got it. Awesome. Listen, I was
Thank you, April. And thank you also for all of you being here this evening and throughout the afternoon and day. We're going to close out right now and remind you that we will be back here, not at 9, but at 8:45 tomorrow morning. We're going to try and stay on time tomorrow since we're supposed to end around noon. Please, all of you, have safe travels as you go around and enjoy your evening. And we will see you tomorrow morning, 8:45, right here at the Hyatt. Thank you.